Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Podcast Juice. My name is Michael Dean. Joining me today, special guest in the building, Mr. Law. Sir, how are you doing, Law? What's up, man?
I am doing great, man. Awesome. Thank you for having me here, man.
Man, thanks for coming through. I think we got to meet in person for the first time, if
For
I'm
the
not
first
mistaken.
time.
Symposium, correct?
Crazy, ain't it?
Brooklyn, New York. You
You
know?
already know, hometown.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, man. And you were presenting, or you were on a panel?
Yeah, I was on the panel for the 40th anniversary of the 1999 era, which includes What Time Is It by the Time and Vanity Six, of course.
Yeah, man. What was the panel that you were on? You remember?
That was the panel we were discussing the Triple Threat tour, which I always call that the tour that Prince got his what handed to him. So it was fun to be able to talk about it in real time with other Prince aficionados that know the history. And of course, my boy C. Lee is amazing as always. Right. And shout out to D'Angela for inviting me for my third time at the symposium. It's a good feeling to be invited, man.
Okay. I see you got your new edition shirt on representing. I love that.
You better believe it. My
have
supreme.
Have you seen the new show?
Oh yeah. Listen, I've that was my first concert. So for me, I've never missed a tour. So
really?
So you do the math. Every reunion, every reunion, every solo tour that they've done, I was there. I was there one way or the other.
Okay, I've only seen them brothers once.
Oh wow!
It was the Any Heartbreak tour. I think that's the only time.
That was the Supreme tour, '88.
Yeah, that was something else. Man, well, with that said, man, you have a very sort of unique and connected history with music. And I think the first way I kind of heard about you is sort of your relation, with the Parliament Funkadelic and that whole camp, man. Give us a little backstory, on that. And here's one thing I want to see if we can do too. Mm-hmm. I was having a conversation with my oldest daughter, and we were talking about the time. I was asking her about the time because we were listening to it, and I come to realize she had really no idea, in a sense, who the time was. And sometimes I wonder if some people don't have much of an idea or don't have a lot of information on Parliament Funkadelic. Now, to me and you, that might sound like, whoa. But, let's kind of ease everybody in and give us a little bit of the backstory of what that means. And obviously, the lineage of these groups is heavily intertwined in our music today and in the last 30 years, for sure. So, yeah, I'm gonna let you ease us into that.
Okay. Well, I mean, the first way I think we need to start just talking about the overall influence of George Clinton and the way his mind worked, because you have to remember, I came up with this thing called the funk analogy. There's only three people that make the thing make sense. James Brown created the funk. Sly Stone diversified the funk, but it was George Clinton and P-Funk that made funk religious. It actually became a genre after Parliament Funkadelic, if you think about it. Yeah, it really became a genre, because even though the solidification was sort of done with James, but when the influence began to spread and everybody took different chapters of each other's stuff and build upon it. That's the reason why if you look at any Earth, Wind and Fire interview or Ohio Players or any other bands that came in between it, the only two grand exception is the Meters and the Ozzy Brothers, especially the Ozzy Brothers. They were there. They were doing something different, but they're the ones that said, okay, this is what's going on now. We need to be a part of this. And that's when we had the 3+3 in that whole era with T-Neck and whatnot. But in the intersection of all of that, Parliament Funkadelic influenced so much of the nuances in terms of experimentation. And without question, Funkadelic, just with Billy Bass Nelson, the late, great Eddie Hazel, Tall Ross, Bernie Worrell, and that whole situation, they are the first, without question, anything in relation to heavy metal, or at least on the black side of it. They're the first. Because remember, without Funkadelic, there wouldn't be Def, there wouldn't be Living Color, there wouldn't be Lenny Kravitz, and they damn sure wouldn't be a Prince, because they were the first to personify let's be free. Now, Sly did it too, but George took it to another level. I mean, anybody can tell you that. George took it to another
Yeah.
level of craziness that even Sly couldn't even do. And Sly would tell you, if he was here right now, Sly would tell you that too. And remember, they're best friends. So it's like
Right.
they
Okay.
the admiration for each other. But everybody else who we love, like the Commodores or how they all came in between that. And if you notice, even towards the late 70s, as experimentation grew with synthesizers, thanks to Stevie and Herbie and the jazz fusion guys, here comes Parliament Funkadelic, especially with the influence of Bernie Worrell. The synthesizer drum machine game came into play, and Parliament Funkadelic were the top tier of that, which intersects once again. It filtered down to our guys in Minneapolis,
Yeah,
because
of course.
Minneapolis was the hot. This was the hotbread of rock and roll, Grand Funk Railroad, that kind of stuff on AM Bread America. But then you also had the regular funk stuff that was played on one radio station in Minneapolis. I mean, those of us that know the history, you know, we've heard Jelly Bean talk about it. We've heard Prince talk about it. We've heard people who can tell you where the Minneapolis sound derivative from. But what do they all have in common? Even on the original 7 documentary, everybody said Parliament Funkadelic. They all had different influences, but Parliament Funkadelic was the main consistent thing. So now it brings us back to this Brooklyn Hood boy that's talking to you now. Having a legendary uncle, my uncle Tony T. Funk Austin, who played for Kool and the Gang and James Brown. If anything, my roots are R&B and gospel and soul, but I was immersed into the funk and rock and roll because of my legendary grandfather as well, Sam Bluesman Taylor, because of his work with BT Express. He wrote Peace Pipe. So I was already in that. So something about Parliament Funkadelic spoke to me thanks to Atomic Dogs. I'm an 80s baby. So that's the first thing I heard before I heard One Nation Under a Groove and Dr. Funkenstein. But again, having an uncle like Uncle Tony, I was exposed to all the Slave, you know, all the stuff that if you're a true funkster at heart, you know what this stuff is. And basically, you know, when I heard Mothership Connection, the album, Skinny George on the UFO in his prime on that album cover, it changed I'm like, this is something here. And then I told my mother boldly, I said, Mom, I'm gonna be part of the P-Funk Army one day. Now, mind you, this is me in 1980, 88, 89. I'm telling my mother I'm gonna be a part of the P-Funk Army. And my mom, you know, being the supportive woman that she's always been, she was like, whatever you say, I believe. I said, you just keep speaking it. And who would have known that 15 something years later, my dream came true. Thanks to my boy Gabe Gonzalez. I'm part of the offshoot band of P-Funk called Enema Squad, as well as 420 Funk Mob, which features Michael Hampton, Billy Bass Nelson, the late great Boogie Monsoon. So literally, I was thrusted into that right after college, like in the whole plethora of that situation. And that's how my journey with P-Funk began. And then when Enema Squad went on hiatus, I ended up working and living with George Clinton himself. And George Clinton became like my father. You know, literally, I call him dad to this day still.
Wow.
And that led to me still performing with 420 Funk Mob and Enema Squad, but also doing production work for George as well as guest appearing with the P-Funk All-Stars every now and then in between everything else. So that's my history with Parliament Funkadelic. And I'm still there. I'm still part of the camp to this day.
Let me ask you this. And are you from Brooklyn?
I am from Brooklyn, NYC, Albany Project, St. Mark's Avenue, Crown Heights.
Oh, so you're right there. So with that said, I mean, with you being in the place of hip hop, that whole movement, you know, culture unto itself, and then being into funk, like how do you guys get into playing the instruments as opposed to, I don't know if you mess around with turntables and sampling and all that other stuff as well, but how do you do they converge together for you, or
the transition was, I can honestly say the transition was smooth because my family, the Taylors and the Worrells, you know, that was my Juilliard for music. Anybody knows what Juilliard represents in New York City, that means every one of my family members was a class in a different genre. So because of my legendary grandfather, that's early doo-wop and rock and roll and blues. And then my mother and my grandmother, Beatrice Taylor, rest in peace, gospel. Gospel's the foundation of it all. So Tremaine Hawkins, Bill Maher, the Clark sisters, You know, I grew up in that thing, Commission, Fred Hammond before he became Fred Hammond. So I grew up in that plethora of the thing. And then unlike most church folks that grow up in the church, secular music was allowed in our home. See, we didn't have
Okay.
that whole, you're going to go to, now the church that my grandmother was a part of, United Missionary, they were lenient towards that. But because me and my mother became non-denominational, it was more freedom there. So then you
Okay.
got my late great uncle Bobby Real Deal Taylor, which was nothing but Motown, Stax, Wilson Pickett, Smokey Robinson, Marvin Gaye. And then you got my older sister Neffy, who was into reggae and new wave and pop music. So we loved the Go-Go's, Devo. We was into all that, you know, especially the early 80s part of it. And
Yes, sir.
then, of course, my grandfather, again, because of his work with BT Express, and my uncle, again, being a legendary funk drummer around New York City, playing with Millie Jackson and the Dramatics and everybody you can think of, the funk was already there. And then here comes my late great uncle, who we just lost 2 months ago, Showbiz Taylor, who can sing. But guess what? His boys were Kumo D, Treacherous 3, Grandmaster
Okay.
Flash, Furious
Okay.
5. So hip hop was already being filtered not only in my neighborhood, but also in our house. And because I have the coolest mom in the world, when she saw her sons and her nephews and her daughters and nieces getting into this new thing that was happening, all of a sudden, my mom picked up on it. And she said, you know what? You like that, huh? You like this rap stuff, huh? And then my mother went and bought me my first 3 rap albums, which of course was Run DMC's first album, the Fat Boys' first album, rest in peace, Prince Marky B,
Yes, sir.
and of course the Furious 5. So when my uncle saw that I had an interest in rap, now keep in mind, by the time I turned 7, I was already playing drums, I'm playing guitar, I'm singing in church, I'm jamming with my family, we're doing the whole thing like all families do that sing together. So my cousin Showbiz is like, you really like rapping, huh, Lord? I said, yeah. Can you teach me how? He said, you want me to teach you how to rap? And literally helped me my first rhyme. But thanks to my grandfather, which was so amazing, when he saw that his grandkids was getting into this new thing that was taking over, his whole thing was, I get all this. It's like, this is how he talked. I'm imitate him. I see all this hippity hip hop shit you're doing. But I'm gonna tell you something. Whatever you do, don't forsake the roots of what started. Because here's the thing: what people don't understand: without the funk, there would be no hip hop. All of the break beats in the earliest songs of hip hop are all based off of what? Funk records. Dance to the drummer's beat. Do 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 do. Bounce. Boom. Then you got Apache. Then you got UFO. Boom. 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 Those are all the break beats that would end up being, spun by the DJs, like Grand Wizard Theodore, of course, DJ Scratch, who's from my projects, EPMD's DJ, DJ Hollywood, of course, the man who created hip hop or started it, Mr. Kool Herc, all of the pioneers were all funk students. They were all students of those great funk records that had the break beats that continued that whole thing. So my understanding was pretty easy. I'm like, okay, well, I started going through my grandfather and my uncle's collection. And what I began to notice around the mid 80s is that some of the samples that Big Daddy Kane and Kool G Rap and LL Cool J were using, like one of my favorite ones is Jack the Ripper, which of course is the Soul Searchers. That's Chuck Brown, Ashley's Roach clip.
Okay.
These were records that my uncle had in his collection. So when I would hear that, then you hear Eric B. and Rakim's Paid in Full. I'm like, oh shoot. So basically, all the rappers who I like are rapping over the funk stuff that my uncle has in his collection.
All the generation had.
I began put 2 and 2 together. So that's why it was easy, because here I am. I got my bass and my guitar. I'm learning all this stuff on my own, self-taught. I'm teaching myself. I already play drums. And then I'm singing. But then all of a sudden, I would make an hour for singing, and then I would just get better at rhyming. So of course, when you have influences like Big Daddy Kane and Kool G Rap and LL and Rakim and those guys, you can't help
That's
but
my era right there too. Kane,
the best era.
Yeah,
the golden era.
Yeah, Juice Crew, all that.
So the Juice Crew, Marley Marl, later on Easy Mo B, and of course my idols Pete Rock, Premier,
Okay.
RZA, all these guys were pretty much creating their own chambers. But what do they all have in common? Most of their production work is based off of 90% of the funk.
Yep.
You dig what I'm saying? So even though hip hop became the epicenter, because without hip hop, and I'm gonna say it because a lot of people don't like to say it, but the truth of the matter is this: without the funk, there would be no hip hop, but hip hop kept the funk alive.
Big Daddy Kane has a verse. What do you say? We
Yep.
sample beats. You try to sue and try to fight us. Man,
You try
we
to
always
fight us,
try to
man, you
fight
still
us.
be at home with arthritis. If we did it live or bring back alive old beats that we appreciated, you wouldn't
Nigga, you
survive.
wouldn't survive.
Another memory to us. Ashes to ashes and dust to dust.
Yeah.
No, Kane told me about that line. He told me when I had him on my podcast, he was telling me,
Okay.
because he's a family friend, my big brother, one of my mentors.
Oh, wow.
And he
Okay.
said, yeah, we're really close. Him and my uncle spent a lot of time together in Brooklyn and Arizona. That's a whole nother story for another day. But Kane told me, I said, let me ask you, what inspired that line? And then I kind of figured it out, but I want to hear him say it. I want to have him say it. It was pretty much when he said that line, it was at a time when a lot of the OGs either had a problem with hip hop or they didn't like the fact that all the guys were sampling their stuff and they weren't getting paid for it. And I gotta kind of agree.
Yeah.
It's good to sample, but considering the
Gotta break bread.
contractual stuff and considering what our pioneers went through, if this new form is going to make money, the rappers should not be the only one getting paid. And the reason why I say that is because when DMX, Jay-Z, and Mace sampled my grandfather's work with BT Express for DMX's biggest hit was Get At Me Dog, his first big hit. That's my grandfather's sample. For BT Express, everything that's good to you ain't always good for you. That guitar line. Boom, 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 boom. And my grandfather's name was in the credits, so I had to ask my granddad. I'm like, you getting checks for this? And he was like, I'm certainly not.
Wow.
So me and my brother, we like, hold up, we got to figure this out. Now we didn't blame DMX, but Def Jam and all the companies that were involved. So if we would have never spoke up and told my grandfather, do you realize all the royalties he would he's been gone for the last 13 years, but thanks to his grandkids fighting and telling him to get his lawyer, the royalties are still coming in. We were able to purchase homes because of the fact that we stepped up. So again, thank God for DMX, but thank God for the funk, because if it wasn't for my grandfather's legendary classic guitar line riff from that record that they sampled, DMX probably wouldn't have a career. I mean, he would have had a career, but it wouldn't have been as explosive, because Get At Me Dog was the song that broke the door down for DMX, but it's based off of my grandfather's legendary guitar riff. So
and that's so interesting.
Yeah,
just the whole point of, and of course, Dr. Dre takes.
Oh, absolutely, he's the greatest producer alive.
He built off the back of Parliament Funkadelic, that whole movement.
End up if you listen to I tell people all the time, before Snoop Dogg, before the Aftermath, before the Chronic, Dre was already on P-Funk time, because if you listen to both NWA albums, they sampled mostly the Bar-Kays, a lot of Bar-Kay samples, and the majority of that stuff was either Steve Arrington, and 90% of it was Parliament Funkadelic.
Absolutely.
That was we want Easy.
They had Bootsy, like, was it the beginning of the video or at the end?
No, at the end.
The end. Yeah.
Easy. We want Easy. This we want Bootsy. So at the end, Bootsy gave him the credit. He said, that's how Easy does it, baby Baba. So that's and once they see, you gotta remember, the cool thing about that era and what I miss about our era, not to get off the topic, but the thing is unlike today, you had to pay homage to the guys you're sampling from, because you got to remember, the West Coast, they know their history. They know who Parliament Funkadelic. It wasn't just so we're gonna find a beat and we're gonna sample it, and we don't know who these guys are. We're just gonna make some money off of it. Dre knew what he was sampling.
Oh, those
and
songs
that's the reason why
the West Coast. Yeah, those are anthems.
No, it's true. I mean, and that's why to this day, if you notice, Parliament Funkadelic, and respectfully speaking, not because James Brown will forever be relevant, but may I dare say, if it's anybody that has more relevancy out of the funk heroes, without question, would be P-Funk, because P-Funk had more freedom. See, James had this thing where don't curse on my records. Parliament Funkadelic, George is the grandfather you could smoke with.
Right. Absolutely.
Like my grandfather. You know what I'm saying? Like George is the cool uncle or cool dad or granddad that allowed you to sample whatever you want to sample. James Brown is like the strict grandfather that didn't want you to do anything unless he gave you a lecture. Respectfully. I'm saying that more so the difference between
That
James and
is a
Pete.
part of our culture. That older black man who ain't playing no games
Yeah.
about business, and he'll do the funny stuff, but not out
Yeah.
front. You know what I'm saying?
And if you look at the transition, look, let me show you how deep it gets with Palm and Funkadelic. If you notice what happened between 74 and 76, Bootsy, Catfish, Rick Gardner,
Mm-hmm.
and Maceo and Fred all came over to Palm and Funkadelic.
Mm-hmm.
And they took the one. George Clinton to this day says, if it wasn't for Bootsy and the rest of the camp, they would have never found the one. Because remember, if you notice the sound of the early Parliament albums, even though they were rock and roll and funky and metal,
Mm-hmm.
when Bootsy and them came, they gave balance to all three genres. That's the reason why Up for the Downstroke and Mothership Connection and Dr. Funkenstein and Funkadelic, the whole thing shifted. Even the later Funkadelic albums like One Nation Under a Groove and Uncle Jam One Shoe began to follow that same formula, but they would still keep the extra rock and roll part of it. So either way, no matter what you got, I got to tell people all the time, Parliament and Funkadelic is essentially the same group, but George Clinton gave Parliament and Funkadelic two different identities, which a young kid from Minneapolis was paying attention to all of this at that time. And we know who that is. So that's how it's all intertwined, because basically, like I said earlier, if it wasn't for George Clinton being so musically diverse in an era where a lot of black artists weren't allowed to be, Parliament Funkadelic had the greatest dilemma. They were too ghetto for the white audiences, but too psychedelic and experimental for the black audiences. That brings a whole nother world together. That's why in 2023, when you go to a P-Funk concert, you see a rainbow. You see everybody. You see kids now. Now that he got his grandkids on stage with him, so all the kids that like trap and hip hop, they're looking at. But then all the old school guys came to hear Flashlight and We Want the Funk, Give Up the Funk. So but look how George brings all that together at 81 years old.
Right.
It's deep. That's what I'm
and with that sort of that history and that trajectory, and you brought up Prince. and in the same way, and I guess what I'm saying, the same way when you went from James, Sly, there needs to be classes taught on what Sly did to the game.
Ooh, you better preach.
Yeah, that brings such a whole thing to us. But then, like you said, what George and them brought is they took the Sly, the James, and
just put a whole nother spin on it.
They made it like a space movie, like you said, it was a religion almost. They put a whole other
George.
Thing.
Think about the intro to the song Mothership Connection. We have returned to claim the pyramids. Like George was talking that science over all this stuff, and each album began to have a theme. Because if you notice, the Funkadelic albums like America Eats Us Young, that was more of a political album. So it began to take shape as George as a conceptualist, because people forget George is the brainchild behind that stuff for a reason, because he had ways and could conjure up melodies that would be a counter to what the band was doing. And when I first worked with him, it made me understand why he's the genius that he is, because I would come in and do some stuff, and then George would go to the mic and just start doing these little, and then all of a sudden, I come back 3 days later, I hear the horns doing what he was humming into the microphone, and that's it. That's how he came up to all this stuff. Oh yeah, it's deep, man. It's deep.
That aspect right there. And now you know him better than I don't know him at all. Is George like he's not a trained musician, like he wasn't necessarily playing really, but conceptually, harmonies, the soul of it, and what he felt is the records. The same way I think of like
Parliament, like you got
the same way you have like when people say about Michael Jackson, he didn't play it. Yeah, but Mike could hum it or beatbox it. It was the soul of the record. It was what we felt as a people. It didn't matter if you know how to play it the way they taught you how to play these instruments. he verbalized the all of
Yeah.
that shit. Like he's just the dopest musician of them all. That he could just his body, his mouth, his rhythm was the dopest
It's
instrument.
I mean,
His
because
mind,
George, George, excuse me, George, gotta remember how Parliament started. Parliament was a doo-wop group first.
right?
Matter of fact, most of the early Parliament songs later became the stuff that they redid for most of the other later albums.
Interesting.
Like for example, All Your Goodies Are Gone. I'm through with you. I refuse to be blue. Then that became dun, 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 and Salt and Pepper sampled that
Right.
for Get
Yeah,
Up,
yeah, yeah.
Everybody Get Up. That's basically a remake of an older Parliament song.
Interesting.
Because he had so many songs, as you know, everybody be talking about Prince's vault, but I remember I lived with George. I stayed at his house.
Mm,
George got like 300 to 500 reels of unreleased P-Funk stuff.
wow.
So I promise you, I still have the box of DATs that he gave me as a gift for producing for him and his granddaughter. So when
Man.
I tell you, it's interesting on all levels. And then you brought up Michael Jackson. Speaking of them,
Mm-hmm.
if you look at the early Jackson 5 stuff, they were both, they were all influenced by Funkadelic and Sly. If you
Mm-hmm.
look at the first 3 Jackson 5 albums, the Jackson 5 covers one of my favorite Funkadelic songs. I'll bet you. Ice cream on a red hot stove with Mel, and I betcha if you want to win it, and if you want, written by my uncle Sidney Barnes, who was George Clinton's writing partner from their days in Motown. Because people forget George
Right.
Clinton was a staff writer at Motown, writing songs for Diana Ross. But when he wasn't doing that, he was working with the Invictus labels and doing the weird Parliament Funkadelic stuff. Because Parliament first tried to get signed with Motown, but Barry Gordy was like, listen, we love you, George, but we already got a 5-man group, and of course we know who that is, because I don't
Right.
care how bad you thought you were, without question, the greatest blueprint of R&B groups is the Temptations, bottom line. And the
Yeah.
thing was just that, and George used to always say, he said, we were the poor man version of the Temptations. We wasn't as smooth as those guys, but we had a thing. But Barry Gordy was like, but I'll tell you what, George, I love your writing, man. So you know what? I'll have you and Sydney and some other people come on as staff writers. So, and if you look at the way the Jackson 5 dressed, and even the Going Back to Indiana album, they had I Want to Take You Higher. So, and this is their influence, because the Jackson 5 weren't taught this. This is the music that we're into. If you ever seen the interview with Jermaine Jackson, who's my first #1 bass idol before I discovered Larry Graham, because that's his hero too. You know what I'm saying? That's how I got deep into Larry, because of Jermaine Jackson. And of course, Kenny Burke from the 5 Stair Steps, who later became known for his club hit Keep Rising to the Top. People forget that that's Kenny Burke from Ooh Child Pink. That's him. That's him and his brothers and sisters.
Okay.
So see how that all interlocks within each other? The thing is that period between 65 and 1973, all the influences began to lock in. You could tell where certain people were getting certain things from. So if you see the Jackson 5, they were dressing like Parliament Funkadelic and Sly. They had the colorful outfits with the butterfly collars. And because Jermaine and Tito and Ronnie Rancifer and Johnny Jackson were only a 4-man band, but they sounded like 7 pieces, because the Jackson 5 were just that deadly, because they were studying Parliament Funkadelic, Sly Stone, and of course James Brown. They were studying all that, and Ozzy Brothers too.
Real quick, I just want to deviate because we're talking about the Jacksons, and I will have my jokes for Jermaine and all, but to keep it a buck, the Jackson 5 though was cold as fuck. Like that was they had it on lock. Like we grew up wanting to be Jackson. The Jackson 5 was the truth. I don't know if they get the kind of accolades that they need to be getting now, because Michael so much that people Tito the Hood, but the Jackson 5 was
I'll make it easy for you. Watch this. Yeah. If you think about any groups, even the guys I have on my shirt right here,
right?
Because between the 60s and let's say early 2000s, when groups were still relevant at that point. Drew Hill to me was the last great R&B group that had influence, because everybody wanted to dye their hair like Cisco. So the thing is that no, it's true. If you notice, everybody that was coming out after, they were trying to borrow the Drew Hill blueprint. And the thing is, the Jackson 5, like any other of the boy bands or the bands, even and people forget, I'm gonna throw somebody else in there. The Osmonds were out before the Jacksons were. If you listen to Joseph Jackson's interview, Joseph said, I used to have my sons watch the Osmonds when they were younger on the Disneyland thing. I said, see, people don't even know that, because everybody just thought, oh, they're copying. But that's another story for another day. The thing is that every group, you know how you determine how important a group is no matter who the lead singer is? Case in point, New Edition. Obviously, Ralph is the front guy, but we know all the names just for one song. Ronnie, Bobby, Ricky, and Mike. Everybody knows, and then you throw Johnny in there because Johnny was already the man before he came in New Edition. He was already the dude. So look at the Jackson 5. You know all the names. Everybody had a favorite because Michael did his duty and his role. He's the lead guy. You know, Marlon is his anchor. That's his older brother, but that's his anchor. He's like, I'm going to shadow Michael and have the dancing part and help him out. Jermaine's going to be co-lead playing the bass, and Tito's going to be the real ultra cool guy that just plays the riffs and all that stuff. Everybody had a role, and everybody had a favorite Jackson. Same thing with the Silver, same thing with the Bars. No matter who was the front person or sang the most lead, if you studied the groups or if you were into the group itself, you knew who everybody was. So it didn't matter if Michael's career, because like Jermaine said in his book, that was inevitable. He said people don't get that. Who do you think that Michael played his first solo stuff for? Hello, his brothers, because it's almost like what you guys think. And he's like, yo, Michael, that song, man, that's going to be hot, because his brothers supported him. There wasn't no degree of separation when it came to that. But people, but like you said, people always try to use that, and I'm gonna say it, white media does that a lot, because they have this thing where it's like, yeah, because it's just Michael and his other brothers. I said, you do realize there was a whole 18-year history before Thriller, right? There's a whole thing. So I'm a diehard Jackson fan. I just told you, Jermaine is the reason why I even picked up bass. So for me, it's gonna always be 6, even though of course Michael and Marlon and Jermaine are my top 3 in that group. But I studied the Jacksons, like all the groups I studied, even with these guys. Every band that I studied, every group that I studied, I always paid attention to everyone, because to be a great leader, you have to be an even better team player. That's my philosophy.
Let me ask you this. I love this, and we're just gonna have a conversation. We're going where we're going.
Yes,
we've been talking about groups. We've been talking about Black groups, bands. What happened, man? Why we're in 2023? What is the premier Black group today? And that haven't been around, like New Edition obviously is still killing them, but I'm talking about who's this generation's Black group.
I got one group in mind. Well, actually 2. Because there's one group that we forget about often, because they're so intertwined in the fabric of hip hop, but people forget how diverse they actually are. If you paid attention, the Roots are still here.
The Roots.
The Roots are still here. The Roots are they kept it alive. Look, even with them being on Jimmy Fallon, they still keep it. It's still there. And then I don't know if you hip to these guys. Actually, it's 2 other people. Tank and the Bangers, they're excellent. They've been around for like a good 4 or 5 years. Oh, you need to get into it.
You said Tank. I'm thinking of R&B.
No, not that Tank. Even though I love that Tank too. He's keeping his podcast is amazing. He's keeping R&B alive too. Yes, so Tank is the man. He's a great opening act for this tour that they're on right now. He's the best opening act for the other opening act. And the thing is, my favorite other group right now. You ever heard of the Internet?
I've heard of them. Yes, I have.
They're
from what is it? They're with the one dude. What's his name?
Yeah. I forgot. I can't even think of his name.
Was it the Odd Future family?
Yeah. Frank Ocean, those guys. That's their crew. Yeah. So the Internet they're dope. There's a lot of. Here's the thing, and I'll say this all the time respectfully, with the exception of the people I just mentioned, and I'm gonna throw myself in there too. Yes, but please, you must. The people, look. I can only say what's true. Reputation is everything in this business. So I stand on that respectfully with no arrogance or no conceit. But with the exception of me, let's take me out the equation. The bands who I just mentioned,
Mhm.
there are also so many other bands who are not getting the leverage, they're not getting the exposure, they're not
Mhm.
getting the respect, they're not getting the spotlight because the industry powers are still what they are. But at the same time, we have the internet. So I tell people all the time, sometimes you can't wait for inspiration. Sometimes you got to get out and find it. That's why
Mhm.
we have Sirius Satellite. That's why we have the internet. That's why we're able to stumble upon groups. That's why a lot of times when I'm just looking through the net and I happen to come across an artist or a band that sounds good, whether they're doing rock, funk, soul, jazz, whatever. And then,
Mhm.
speaking of which, my little brothers who started with us right before their fame took off, Snarky Puppy, they were part of my corporate band. They were part of Element Music before they took off. See what I
Okay.
mean? Snarky Puppy's another. They've been winning Grammys for consecutively for the last 5 or 6 years, and they're a collective. And then, of course, anything that Robert Glasper does with Terrace Martin, Derek Hodge, and those guys. I mean, anytime that they put out any project, I don't even
Mhm.
wait for anything to be released. I'm like, purchase Spotify, because I already know it's going to be a musical excursion of real
Mhm.
musicianship with bands involved that can play anything from funk to jazz to rock and roll. I mean, come on. Robert Glasper did a jazz funky version of Smells Like Teen Spirit by Nirvana. Come on, man. Who does that? And Nirvana's in my top 5 is for rock groups. So my thing is for Robert to do that, it shows a diversity. But like I said, to add to what you just said, there are many, many artists on the Black Rock Persuasion, Black Rock channels. There's a whole lot of different things that we can get into, and not just Black either. I'm not just say for the Black artists, but just a lot of other great
Sure.
diverse artists of any color. You know,
And you brought up some great bands, and one of the things I wonder, and maybe it's just a different time in the marketplace, but it's you know there was always those groups that had the pulse of the culture of the streets. Like everybody was jamming. There was the jams. There was,
yeah,
for me, the last ones I think of that I fucked with heavy, and I like Tony, mint
absolutely,
condition.
absolutely.
I mean, they like the ladies had that. You know what I'm saying? Or if you had to put on this, or it just feels like I don't know if it's because of the internet. There's just so much choice
Mm-hmm.
that it's a little harder maybe to, like you said, we have to go out and find these groups as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to what they're pushing to us to listen to. And I don't know if they're
We
not
can't
pushing the
make it.
band
The,
anymore.
you know, the last thing I'm gonna say this. Um, Shout out to heaven to my late great dear friend Tina Marie.
Oh,
I was going to work on Tina Marie's last album. That's literally she approved me as one of the producers for the last
wow.
project. And the very last text that she sent to me, which was 3 days before she passed away. That's why I get every time Tina
Mm,
Marie comes on, I get emotional because we were already starting to work together and put things together. And we used to do this thing on Twitter all the time. The fans used to love it. It's like, we're going to see them play Guess That. He said, I know Law know this song. Law knows all this stuff. He said, I bet you, let me sing the first lyric. So I said, oh, that's the Dells. Oh, what a night. And then she was like, see, Law, that's why I love you. Yeah, baby, that's that real R&B, not that BS they try to feed us. And that's the
interesting.
last text that she
Wow.
sent to me. 3 days later, I got the call I didn't want to get. So for me, the mission is always intensified. And because everybody know who Tina Marie's cousin is, who's been one of my dearest friends for the last 20 something years, the great, amazing, always Miss Jill Jones. You dig what I'm saying? So that connection happened even more because when Jill found out me and Tina were going to work together, Jill's the one that told Tina in front of everybody on social media, yo, cuz, Law's the truth. That's my guy. Yeah, I'm glad that y'all working. So, you know what I mean? So for me, it's a mission that intensifies. When we talk about new music and we talk about other bands who have come and gone, I mean, don't get me wrong. Stokely's solo career was inevitable because he's just that dope of a musician and one of the baddest R&B soul singers, bar none. But however, there's still a difference. If you
Hmm.
know that, if you see the stage show, I love him. It's not the
Hmm.
same though. Same thing with That's why I look Raphael getting back with the 2 other members, and a shout
Yeah.
out to the other members of Tony, like Jubu. Ela J. Baker, Carl Wheeler, and Antoine Hale. So shout out to them
That's a
guys too.
whole other story.
That's another story, but I'm
Right.
just saying,
Yeah.
I feel the need and responsibility because you got to remember, I was a young kid paying attention to all of that at the
All of
same
them.
time,
Yeah.
not the people who were being marketed. Because I'm into bands, I love seeing the structure of how
Right.
things are being built. So, perfect example: Run DMC was Run DMC, but as we all know, without Jam Master Jay, it wasn't complete. Salt and Pepper without my best friend Spinderella.
Interesting.
Yeah. See what I mean? Like, was one of my very best friends in the world. So what I'm telling you is that if you notice the interconnection between how we find groups, and that's why I tell people all the time, one of my mottos is support or shut up. And people should be like, that's kind of harsh. So I said, no, it's not harsh. You have to understand something. If I hear one more person say, bring the real music, if I hear that shit one more time, bring the real music back. The real music never left. What the fuck are you talking about? I said, you know how many artists between the last 20 years, major label wise and indie wise, that have put out albums, and you're not doing that because they, I didn't know that they, I said, well, okay, if you didn't know, we're not going to get mad at you. But now that you know, what the fuck you want to do? I'm gonna go hard. I'm not waiting for people to make them relevant. I don't even like that word because the thing is that icons are forever relevant. Like Prince said in the interview, Prince was like, no project I've ever done has been a make it or break it project. For me, I did what I felt, even though people may assume that, oh, maybe he got into this because he might have felt like this might have been that. But ultimately, you're not going to tell Prince Rogers Nelson what he should do. He's Prince. But look, that's what people don't get. He's like, oh, because you have to make this record to be. I'm like, it may be some truth to that, but everybody knows ultimately Prince Rogers Nelson, like Stevie Wonder, my other idol, is going to do what the fuck he wants to do. So us, the consumers, I'm an artist, but as you see, I am still a fan and supporter.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I've been close with Ralph and Biv for close to 20 something years now. And even with me being at the shows and hanging out backstage, I still go to the merch table and support.
Okay, wow.
I've gotten hats for free from Biv and the whole shit. I can get that anytime I want to, but I support my idols. You dig what I'm saying? I don't just talk.
As we should.
I live it. I don't sit there and wait for that. I don't wait for radio. When New Kids on the Block put out the last 2 albums they put out was off the chain. And when I go to the concerts to see all the other fans singing the new shit and not just the classic stuff, that makes me smile. I'm like, that means they've been really paying attention to that, you know?
Did I see some pictures with you and them online?
Of course. Donnie's one of Donnie's my best friend.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm working on some stuff with him now as we speak, and we're planning a couple of shows in terms of that they want me to come and do some stuff with them. But it's the same thing with them because people don't realize. Same thing with New Kids. The Right Stuff was their homage to the Minneapolis sound. Maurice Starr created that thing on purpose. If you listen to when they do it live now, they interpolate cool. Break it down, y'all. Bam. Dun, 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 dun. I'm like, see, I always knew there was a connection between that. So when Donnie told me this, and I already knew, but I wanted to hear Donnie tell me. I said, Donnie, please tell me that Maurice Starr. He said, oh, without question. He said all of us were in the Prince at that point. So of course, Jordan came up with the choreography for The Right Stuff. So when they do the they basically do the penguin that Mars Day and them do. They wasn't copying, they were basically showing love. It's like, look, we into it too. We ain't no white kids from the suburbs. We're from Dorchester, we're from Roxbury. So we grew up listening to all the shit that our black friends were listening to too. We wasn't on no opposite side of the fence. Most of our friends that we grew up with were black, and we love soul music. They were white.
I wish I knew that back then. I wish it was marketed. I understand why it wasn't, but man, I wish I'd have known that off the top when it first dropped, because you could kind of hear it, but the way it was presented, I was like, oh, no,
because you know why? Because the thing was, just to give you, not to deviate too much from that, but I'm gonna give you a quick rundown. The original strategy for New Kids on the Block. They are, if you look at the old footage from way back in the day when they were doing like promo tours, they are a white R&B hip hop group. They were never a pop group. If you listen to the first album, all of their songs are derivative of all of the early boy band shit. Stop It Girl is a takeoff of One Bad Apple from the Osmonds. I Want to Be Loved by You, where they introduced their names and their signs. That's Float On. Cancer. And I'm Jonathan. But it's so obvious. And then what's the other one? Popsicle. That's basically Candy Girl, because Maurice Starr produced New Edition too. You gotta remember, when New Edition left Maurice Starr, all the songs that he had for the second album for New Edition didn't happen. So he gave those songs to New Kids on the Block. Please Don't Go Girl is basically, is this the end? Please don't go, girl. Is this the end? It's the same shit. The same thing of what they did, because Maurice Starr said in several interviews, when I wrote Candy Girl, that's basically ABC.
Right.
Candy Girl, AB. It's the same shit. So when New Kids on the Block, I'm gonna tell you what happened with them. So the first album didn't do all that well, but then the second album, they said, okay, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna keep the shit R&B and hip hop, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna do a couple of experimental things that cater more to who y'all guys are in addition to that, because y'all do love R&B and soul music, but y'all also like Journey and Bon Jovi. So when you hear songs like Cover Girl, which was basically a rock pop song, oh, she's my cover girl, that's pop. So basically what happened was, I'm gonna tell you what happened was, Please Don't Go Girl is an R&B song. There's nothing pop about that song. Joey and Jordan are soulful. Jordan's falsetto is influenced by Blue Magic and Stylistics. That's his heroes, his idols. Let's get that part straight.
Wow,
I'll be loving you forever.
I'm getting cool right now.
But if you want, but you gotta remember, Michael, they were on Soul Train before they blew up. They were doing Soul Train. They were being played on BET, because the marketing strategy was, okay, we are a white R&B hip hop group, and because we do have a black audience. Same thing with Vanilla Ice. His whole audience was black for the first 4 years, and Vanilla Ice has always said, I never ever had a desire to play for a pop white audience until SBK gave me the deal of a lifetime, because Chuck D from Public Enemy was going to sign Vanilla Ice. I don't know if you knew that.
I don't think I remember that part.
I have the interview in the clip with Chuck talking about it. He says it's true. It's very true. Public Enemy, and I truly believe if Public Enemy would have signed Vanilla Ice, he would have never got backlash, because even they knew how dope Vanilla Ice was. They knew. That was no phony thing. That was
Ice Ice Baby was a legitimate hit in the street. Like that was like
a regional hit before it became a mainstream hit. So, so anyway, so with New Kids, the strategy, even though it was winning some of the black fans in the region, it wasn't crossing over. So of course they're signed to a major label, and Columbia's like, listen, we love y'all guys. Y'all are talented, but this next album is going to have to hit big. Otherwise, we're going to have to drop you. It's not working. And ultimately, a Florida radio station played the very R&B Please Don't Go Girl on a pop radio station. And that's when things changed, because now Maurice Starr was like, all this time we've been pushing them through the black door, not the back door, the black door. But then we just realized, demographic wise, the white teenage girls haven't had nobody to scream for since the Osmonds. New Edition had the black one. Now, mind you, just so we clear, music is colorblind and universal for everybody. Doesn't matter if you're white or black. You love who you love. But demographic wise, the record labels, as you know, Michael, the record labels played this game, which is basically, okay, we're going to market New Edition to the young black teenage girls like the New Jackson 5. That's why they're called New Edition. They were a new addition to the old school. And then you got Menudo. Now the Spanish girls got somebody they can scream for. And now finally, even though we didn't know off the rip that New Kids on the Block was white, and the Florida racists didn't know until they played the record. But then people were like, who's this group? Who's this? And once the white girls saw these 5 white kids from Dorchester, that's when they became accidentally a pop group. And of course, it was smart. It was like, okay, we're going to still do some R&B and hip hop, but we're going to start incorporating more of the pop stuff now. So when you hear songs like Tonight, dun, 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 Tonight, it's simple. But then you got songs like Step by Step, which is very R&B, but it has a pop feel to it. And Face the Music, which was produced by Teddy Riley and my mentor, the great Leon Silvers. See, a lot of people don't know.
Interesting.
See what I mean? New Kids on the Block have always kept the reach of their roots of who they are. That's why people shouldn't be shocked when Donnie started rhyming or the No More Games remix. Because if you listen to the first New Kids on the Block albums, Donnie was always rhyming and singing. See what I'm saying? But people don't understand the lens because we didn't have the internet back then. So, of course, to the average black person, it's like, oh, these white kids trying to be like New Edition. I said, no, they are the white New. No, they are. No, look, they are the white New Edition, but they already had that acceptance already because you got to remember, Biv and Ralph and all those guys. As a matter of fact, here's another footnote for you. Brooke Payne did the choreography for Step by Step. Yeah. See what I mean? See?
That.
But if I would have never said anything,
let me ask you, you could break this down, and we'll talk about this on a different podcast. Any Heartbreak, what's the song? This is where it all started from.
Yes.
Are they talking about New Kids on the Block? Is that what they were sort of getting at?
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say this. I think, and it wasn't so much about New Kids on the Block. I think it was more so about the fact that there was so many. You gotta remember, because by 88, you had Troop.
Yeah.
About Troop.
That's right.
Which Troop is basically the West Coast New Edition for all intents and purposes.
Troop was cold though.
No, they still cold. Absolutely. So you had Troop. You had High Five would come out a year later. Then you had a few other guys. Then right around that corner, I know because they came later. But right around that window, right after 89, 91, after Troop and High Five and remember 4x4? I don't know if you remember that group. They had a song called Come Over. So then the Jets were still popping at that time, which was Minneapolis, but still they were still being promoted and marketed as a teenage act, even though of course they were Minneapolis funk derivative by all intent purposes, but they were still being marketed as they're the cute family group, the Jets, yay, So competition was already becoming what it was becoming, and not on purpose, because you gotta remember, that's how it is in the music industry. When one thing is hot, here comes some more shit. Record labels, we need a group like that. We need somebody like this. We need a group like this. You know what I'm saying? So all of that shit falls in line. So I'm pretty sure it wasn't a direct dig at New Kids, because you gotta remember, they all knew each other. Now, Biv has always been very vocal in saying, because that him and Don, they're like this, both Leos. He said the thing that bugged us out about New Kids is that they had all the shit that we didn't have. How come we don't got t-shirts and lunch boxes and all that stuff? But I'm gonna be honest with you, that had nothing to do with New Edition. That had more so to do with MCA not being smart enough to say, you know what, while New Edition at the height of their powers, we should start getting into that. Maurice Starr and Columbia Records were very smart enough to say this phenomenon is getting big. So you know what? We need to capitalize off of this shit even more. So next thing you know, we got lunch boxes, we got cartoons, And mind you, I truly believe that New Edition could have easily had that, because look who had the first cartoon hip hop wise. Kid and Play. Of all the rap groups in the world that became notorious, Kid and Play and Hammer, even though Hammer, that Hammer cartoon was, whatever. But I understood it though. I wasn't a hater. I understood it. It's commerce. As Tyrese was saying, commerce, nigga. Hey, it's commerce. So the thing is that on Baby Boy, remember he was preaching to his best friend, commerce, nigga. So it's almost like you got to understand the wealth of all that was going on. And Biv would always say, he's like, how come we didn't get any of this? It had nothing to do with them, because New Edition is the most popular boy band R&B group of they're the Temptations of our generation. So think about that for 1 second.
Yeah,
it's not their fault, because they had a bad, even though they sold the records. And Ralph will tell you, they got $1.87 for Candy Girl. They had the worst record deal probably in the history of music. So, but that's what happened. But in any event, New Kids, that's the breakdown of that whole structure, because a lot of people didn't know the history. That's why people are like, oh, I'm surprised at Donnie. I said, oh, y'all late to the party. I said, if you don't know the history of New Kids, I give up. You need to go do the information. If you need me to teach you some courses, I'll give you that too, so you can understand why they are who they are. They're not white suburban kids. Dorchester is the hood, my dude. That's the hood. That's not the suburbs. That's not middle class. That's still, you ever seen Dorchester before? That's the hood.
No.
Right around the corner from Roxbury, where New Edition's from. Right around the corner.
Interesting. So that puts all of the early Marky Mark stuff into
Oh,
context.
absolutely. And that's a whole story for
that road, but yeah.
Absolutely. No, because that saved his life. Donnie came off the road with New Kids because his mother said, come get your brother. He's going to get murdered out here in these streets. And that's how Mark Wahlberg became Marky Mark and then later became Mark Wahlberg again. And it changed his life. It saved Mark's life. Mark would be dead or in prison right now if Donnie hadn't came back and got him. Good Vibrations, even though that song was what it was, but it saved his life. So that's what I'm trying to tell you is deeper. And him and Danny produced that whole record. See, Danny and Donnie did a lot of production work for other people too that people don't even know about. So yeah.
All right. Well, salute to the New Kids and the whole camp. You know what I'm saying? To them brothers. Let's get into some Prince here, shall we?
Yes.
All right. I don't know where to begin, but let me do it this way. What was it about Prince when you first heard, if you can remember what song it was, or maybe you saw some performance? What was that thing that got you to say, okay, Prince, I'm getting into this?
Well, it starts with my incredible mother, Sandra Taylor.
Okay.
The woman who sang Tremaine Hawkins in church. But because of the freedom that I had in my household, unlike most Black kids that come from church, I discovered. Now, keep in mind, because I'm born in the mid 70s, but technically I'm an 80s baby, because you gotta remember, you don't know shit at 3 or 4 years old. But when you become 5 and 6, you begin to unravel and discover more about who you are. So, of course, like most 80s babies, for me, the first initial Prince reaction, of course, was 1999 and Purple Rain. But here's where it gets interesting. Even with all of that, I Want to Be Your Lover was still being played already, but I didn't know that was Prince, though. That's the funny thing. I didn't know that was Prince. I just hear that record and just be like, I like this song. So, of course, leave it to my mother, my incredible mother again, to start to school me in ways I hadn't been schooled before. Because here I am, when I first heard Let's Go Crazy, when I saw Little Red Corvette and I saw him do the breakdown with the breakdance part and the splits, and I'm like, oh shit, okay. Because at that point, I'm all about Michael Jackson, and of course, these guys. Now watch how these guys play into this. You're gonna laugh. I'm gonna get to that in a minute. So the funny thing is that I like this guy. Pretty interesting. Then Purple Rain comes out, takes over the world. Then I see the video on, I think it was either MTV or one of them things, and Prince does that guitar solo that pretty much made me look at my guitar like this. My mother bought my first electric guitar. I'm looking at Prince murder this fucking solo, and I started crying. And my mom was like, why are you crying, Lawrence? Because you bought me this guitar and it's not doing what Princess is doing. So basically, yeah, I literally went into a crying fit. I'm like, how come my guitar doesn't sound like that? And thanks to my mother's boyfriend, one of the baddest guitar players to come out of Southside Jamaica, Queens, rest his soul. He's like my father. Mike Bailey, one of the baddest guitarists to ever play in New York City, local hero.
Okay.
He was dating my mom at the time. So he comes over one night. He said, so mom tells me, because she didn't understand how guitars, but she knew how guitars did, but she didn't know how they work. So it's like, what's the matter? You don't like your guitar? I said, yo, Mike, it's not. How does that sound? He said, well, Lawrence, because you don't have a distortion pedal. What's that? That's the thing that makes the rock and roll sound. So for Christmas, this man bought me my first distortion pedal. I still have it, actually.
Wow.
Bought a new one since then, because of course that's from like 1984. But the Boss distortion pedal. And again, once I plugged that thing in and he taught me how to use that shit, you couldn't tell me nothing. Self-taught, but once I heard that sound, it was like, it made me want to get better. It made me get better as a guitar player. So anyway, going back to Prince. So now I'm going through my mother's record collection, and I discover this light sky aqua blue album with Prince with long hair. And I'm saying to myself, wait a minute, that's the same guy. He looks different. But on this album cover, and then of course, when I flipped it around, he's butt ass naked on a unicorn.
Like, wait a minute.
Fuck. And of course, leave it to my mother to school me. And I'm looking at, I want to be a lover. I'm like, hold up, wait a minute. I put the record on. Dun, dun, dun. Oh shit, he made that too. And that's when I began. This is when Law started doing his homework. Now I'm like, and then my uncle had the classic Dirty Mind album.
Oh wow.
So now I go to my aunt Victoria's house. She has the For You album. Now I see Prince with a big ass afro. And I hear the song I'm Yours. And I'm like, so he's been beasting like that on guitar since he started. So by the time I'm in my Purple Rain phase, by that point, everything was Minneapolis for me. And even though I love MJ to death, because of course that's my first primary idol outside my family, as time went along, Prince became the catalyst, because very much like our hero, because everybody knows his idol is Stevie Wonder. So the more I paid attention to that, the more I began to see the raw musical expression. I'm noticing that Prince is connecting these worlds between classical string arrangements on top of funk and rock grooves, then the haunting ballad gothic piano shit like Condition of the Heart or The Beautiful Ones or International Lover, Free, things like that. And I'm noticing the sensibilities of the connection. Then you hear a song like Delirious, which is basically Chuck Berry and Little Richard on acid. So I began to see he's taken all these things that I've heard before, not from him, but I've heard the genres before. And I'm like,
flipping.
He's giving it a polish that nobody else was really giving it. Prince took everything he learned from Stevie, from Little Richard, from Carlos Santana, from Hendrix, and putting it all, and of course, Parliament Funkadelic is where, and definitely Sly Stone.
Oh yeah.
Revolution, that's basically the Sly Stone blueprint. That's why when you see the original 7 interview when Mars was talking about, you know, I thought Prince was gonna make me his drummer. When I saw Bobby Z, you know, I'm like, well, he can't fuck with me, but you know what? I understand why. Because Prince was going for that whole Greg Errico, who I had the chance to play with on stage. Me and him played drums together. Wow. Oh yeah.
Wow.
So this is what I'm saying. So, well, I have to, because you gotta remember, these are moments that no one could take from me, because God forbid, I mean, we're losing our heroes at a more rapid pace this era than we've ever had. Personally, I never thought Prince would die. I never thought Michael Jackson would pass away.
Right.
So the thing for me is that going back, when I started thinking about the time I got into these guys, so of course that opened the door for all things Minneapolis. So now I'm paying attention to Mars Day. Now, of course, if you know the history with me and Mars, we became their opening act in the late 90s. So we're studying them now, and then we're looking at all the cam members. Now we're looking at the family. Now we're looking at Maserati. And like, now we're studying the Jets. We like, oh, because Crush on You, that's straight up Minneapolis. That whole vibe, the steps and shit. I'm like, I could see it. And then, of course, for people that don't know, the Jet stuff was produced by Bobby's older brother, David Z.
Oh, okay.
People forget.
Interesting.
See, it makes sense. Their first rehearsals were in Paisley Park.
Wow.
Keep in mind, the Jets were already dope before they came to MCA. They used to be a band. They were called Quasar back in the day.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So it was like hitting in that area.
Oh, Minneapolis and Hawaii. They got old videos posted and everything. The Jets was already the truth.
Interesting.
When they got to MCA, of course, you know, A&Rs get into the mix. So we're gonna do this. We're gonna make these kind of songs. As a matter of fact, the song "Dreaming of You" by Selena, that was originally written for the Jets, which makes sense because it sounds like a Jet song. Every night I dream of you. It sounds like Elizabeth, who's the female lead singer of the Jets. It sounds like the Jets.
Okay.
You know what I mean? That whole vibe. And then Rupert Holmes wrote, what's his name? You got it all over him. That was written for DeBarge originally. It sounds like DeBarge. It does sound like DeBarge.
Wow.
Yeah, it's all intertwined. But anyway, so Prince ultimately became my number one guy, because ultimately I began to have a desire to just not want to be a R&B soul / hip hop guy. Prince expanded my musical horizons. Stevie did too. Both of them. That's my top two for this day. And if you want to add a third in there, the Ozzy brothers, definitely. So watch this. Now, I started doing my first shows at 7 or 8 years old, imitating Michael and Prince, because I could really sing. So the thing for me was that it was easy for me to sing over the thing, but because I can do all their moves, at 8 years old, I was already doing the moonwalk and shit, killing it, and doing Prince splits. I'm wearing the eyeliner. I'm wearing the hair. Yeah, 8 years old. And the crazy thing is that you gotta remember, at this time, this was the era, and I'm gonna say it respectfully because we live in a different world now. This is the era where people looked at Michael as the normal guy and Prince was the weirdo.
I remember this.
You know, I know you do. That's why I'm speaking to you directly and to everybody who's going to be listening. But everybody remember that era. And a matter of fact, I remember this. Imagine me at 8 years old. So we're doing these family shows now. It's me, my Uncle Bobby, my Uncle BB, my mother. So we're doing Parks Department shows around New York City. We playing Queensbridge. We in the hood. We playing Queensbridge. We playing Manhattan. Wow. We in Harlem. So I had to play two of my heroes. So I remember as I'm getting dressed, my Uncle BB comes out. He said, who up in here likes Michael Jackson? Yay! Who likes Prince? Yeah, a couple of people. He's like, oh, you don't like Prince? He's like, what do you like about Prince? And the little kid said, and this is the hood, mind you, I think Prince is up. You know, the F word.
Right.
Yeah. I think Prince is assistant. And that's the thing, because at that time, you know, because Prince was playing so many games with the whole androgyny movement, which had not, keep in mind, the androgyny theory was not understood by niggas from the hood. Not yet. Later on, they would get it. That's why Charlie Murphy's description.
It still isn't.
No, no. I mean, no. It's. Here's the thing.
I know what you're saying.
Live with it. It's accepted me because you know you can't. You're not going to fight that. But the thing was just that. That's why the accuracy of Charlie Murphy's story about Mickey Free was so on point. Because honestly, a lot of my uncle's friends thought Mickey Free was a girl. Right. And mind you, and Mickey's not gay. Now, and if he was, I wouldn't care. But I'm just saying the point I'm making is that was the movement at the time. So here's Prince spearheading it with his image, and here I got to come out after a kid my age. I think Prince is that, you know, and it's like, damn, that doesn't help me at all. So I got to come out and roll over the floor and do the humps on Darling Nikki and whatnot. And I'm scared. This kid's gonna look at me wanting to fight. And thank God I know how to whip ass. Nobody was going to pull me. I'm from St. Mark's Ave, Albany Project. I will fuck you up. Don't. That was the stigma I already had to deal with. Being a falsetto singer, that was already a stigma. They thought that guys that sang the way that me and my uncle were, like we were soft. I'm like, no. I'm gonna quote Motley Crue. Just because we have high voices and wear makeup, that don't mean we won't fuck you up. Don't be stupid. Please don't be stupid. And I had to prove that stigma way too many times because, as my best friend to this day will tell you, in hashtag law got hands, because I was notorious. We were notorious for putting in work. So my thing was just that was a fine line. But anyway, with Prince, it just, for me, I started noticing different things. No Prince album is the same. Every time he changed an album, new year, new hairstyle. New album. What genre have I tapped in? What genre haven't I tapped into yet? That's why when you hear songs like Blue Light, Prince never did reggae before, and he did it dope. It was so, but look, it was still Prince though. Then you got songs like let me think of another one. Then you got Melt With You and My Name Is Prince. That's EDM with a Prince feel. So that just made it even more applicable. And then that whole MPG era by itself, as I've said on numerous occasions, because everybody then saw me on the panels and symposiums and stuff, the Sign of Times era is my number one favorite era of Prince, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But the MPG era is my second favorite era, because you got to remember, I'm a real singer who's a real musician that really produces, songwrites, and dance, but I'm still a real MC. So so to see my number one idol tap into the full part of hip hop, even though he did it with Irresistible Bitch first, but the thing is that with MPG and Tony's influence, he really tapped into it. And then having the Game Boys do the steps. So you gotta remember, it didn't make sense for me until them, and second most importantly, going back to these guys. Now, mind you, New Edition is my first concert. So even though Prince, MJ, Stevie Wonder, Jimi Hendrix, and Ozzy Brothers, and James Brown are my first primary heroes as a kid, they were all adults. But when you see 5 young kids from the hood like you that sing, rap, and dance, all this shit, made a pickle. It's my first concert. So we go to the concert. We loving it. They're doing cool. They're doing all this shit, all this we studying. And then all of a sudden, Rob says, let me ask y'all something. Y'all like Prince? They go crazy. I'm like, what? And they did. If you look at it, it's on YouTube now. They did I Would Die for You. So to see the young kids who are, no, I mean, they're a little bit older than me, but they still look like me. They dress like me. Right. So to see them in their suits and sneakers doing a routine and singing, not trying to sing, they singing. I Would Die for You. That made me stand even more in my justification about my love for my idol. So as I got deeper into it, the cross-pollination of everything Prince did, I paid attention to. Detail. Then I would notice he would add certain things. Oh shit, that's Body Heat that Brown Mark is playing. Okay. James Brown. I see it. Okay. And ultimately, as I became part of my own artistry, because you gotta remember, Prince's whole goal was to influence, but his whole thing, and even up until the day he died, it was like, he didn't like talking about his gear, what he used and all that shit, because his whole thing was find your own sound. I sort of agree with him, but I disagree with him, because I'm like, but Prince, you didn't find your own sound until like your 4th or 3rd album. So don't try to run that game on the new generation now, because you wouldn't be who you are if it wasn't for you studying Carlos Santana.
Prince was doing with James it's the same kind of spirit of James is this that older, like I did what I'm doing, but you don't worry about what I'm
doing. But Prince, in that part, in my personal opinion, my idol had it wrong, because that's how you started. In musicology, you shouted out who you listened to pretty much. Number one. And then number 2, us guys who know, I mean, come on. The fact that you knew who Sheila E. was before she could even introduce herself, because you were studying her and her father, one of my favorite groups, Azteca, which featured, Sheila's dad and her uncle. That's Latin funk. Prince was paying attention to all the Bay Area. That's why 90% of the musicians in the Sign of Time era were from where? The Bay. Because Prince was studying. And that's why, Prince had a mystique. He's not going to let you know that he's peeping what you're doing.
That's what I'm saying. Like, he's studying his ass off.
You know what? I'm going to take a little bit of this. I'm going to still be me, but I'm going to take some of this. Matter of fact, I'm going to bring these guys on, because Miko is bad. Levi is bad. Sheila's definitely bad. Let me put them in my camp. See what I mean? So Prince was when it came to that, he was very good at facilitating and organizing to aid in his vision of where he was going to go next. That's why sometimes my favorite era, because to me, at that particular point, between the Parade album, the Madhouse projects, which blew my mind, actually, Madhouse got me deeper into jazz alongside Anita Baker's Rapture album. That's how I got deeper into jazz, because now I'm having a better understanding. And right around this time, hip hop began to move from the funk samples to the jazz samples, Diggable Planets. Then you got US3, then you got Gangstar, and definitely Tribe Called Quest. So now you understand my musical world. That's why it's called Planet 12, because my musical worlds were colliding between the ages of 12 and 15 for me. It was starting to collide because I began to make sense of who I was as an artist. I'm all these things, like Prince. I'm all these things, not trying to be like him, but more so in that I'm not gonna get up on stage and know how he'll boost. That's just not me. I'm not into that. So for me, it's like, how can I find a way to use all of the influences of who I love and still be me? So when you got people like Gigi from the Bay, everybody knows Gigi. When they came to see me in Minneapolis, and all the other people of the Prince community, they would all say, and it humbled me so much. He just like, because we're very picky. I said, listen, I'm picky right along with y'all, but you do actually, like, your whole thing, you do the legacy the way it's supposed to be done. And what I love is that you do it with your own flavor, but you can see the influence. I said, of course. I said, because I think, for people that copy too much, and then for people that don't have enough to have that, because my personal opinion is, if you're going to do a tribute thing of any artist, not just, especially Prince and Stevie, your originals better be dope too. Because if your originals are corny, it doesn't serve the purpose. So I made sure that that part of me is always in existence, because when we go to places like Minneapolis or Detroit or Chicago, we pay homage. But in all senses form, Prince became the epitome of how I base everything in terms of influence, in terms of how I incorporate certain things, and how I feel like we can go from one extreme to the next, how we can put this on top of this, because it made me understand all of my heroes. So after Prince, after I went through my Prince phase, I began to study the guys who he studied. So that's where you have to go back to the slide. And my mother saw me getting deep. So my mother bought me my first Sly and the Family Stone record. And I'm
Which one was
listening the Greatest Hits album first. I always tell people, when you
That's
get
what
into
I
it,
started. Yeah.
you know why? Because my mother's on tour right now. She's an amazing woman. My mother, but she saw me getting into Prince that heavy. She said, okay, let me start investing in who he's going to listen to. Because mind you, I already got a legendary grandfather, so the blues is covered. Albert Collins and B.B. King should be at my house. So you got to remember, that was already covered. Benny King should be at my house. So this is what I'm saying.
Gotcha.
So I grew up with people, Carl Wilson from the Beach Boys, because my grandfather used to work for their record label. So celebrities were coming by the house. We were living on the West Coast at that time before I came back to New York. So we literally, so that part was covered. Blues and doo-wop, because my grandfather was in the Blues Hall of Fame. He's a legend. So that part was covered. But now here I am, and I even got my grandfather into Prince, but before he was like, this Prince guy, does he do any blues? And I played Question to You, and he was like, oh, okay, all right, okay. Now I see why you like him so much.
Right.
Because my grandfather began to understand that. I said, Gramps, I want to do what he's doing. I see you want to, like the Ozzy Brothers, you want to incorporate the funk, the rock, and the hip hop. And so my grandfather began to understand me even more. We're both Scorpio, so he knew, but he didn't want to interfere. See, exactly. See what I'm saying? You already know. See, so he didn't want to interfere with my musical journey, because nobody bothered his. But when my grandfather understood my love for Prince, but my mother nurtured it. My first Jimi Hendrix album was All You Experience. When she bought that for me, then it's like I'm listening to Prince's solos, I'm hearing Hendrix, and then my mother bought me the first Carlos Santana album with Persuasion, Jingo, Evil Ways, and I'm starting to listen to Chaos and Disorder. That's straight up Santana. That's Soul Sacrifice. That vamp out. I said, I see where Prince got that from, but that's because Prince always found a way to incorporate, and somewhere during that period, now you got all the other bands who are bold enough to take their stance. Young Lenny Kravitz, because Prince is his idol, because me and Lenny Kravitz had the same understanding. Then you got Terrence Trent D'Arby, who now goes by, I can't pronounce that name for Sonata, whatever. Yeah, but when you saw Terrence Trent D'Arby, I'm like, that's obvious. I could see the influence in that. But Terrence still put his own thing on it. He had that Sam Cooke soulfulness, that raspiness. He had a little bit of that James Brown. But then again, James Brown, Prince and Michael are the sons of James Brown. All of them.
Absolutely.
And the goals go back. And because my uncle T-Funk played for James Brown, I already had that down pat. If you go to my shows, you'll see it, because I grew up in it. That's why I can tell. He's like, damn, Lord, how do you know the difference between that bass line and that? Because most James Brown songs in the key of D. So pretty much all you have to know is the difference between get up, get into it, get involved, and soul power. So this is me studying, and I'm looking at Prince's shows, and I'm seeing how he's incorporating different things. And you got a song like Anesthesia, which is very haunting. Then you got the Batman soundtrack, where he's just experimental. It's rock. It's a little bit of funk there too, but it just had this real gothic balance. Am I making sense?
No, I'm totally with you. Yeah.
But it intrigued me, because I'm like, one album he's doing this, next album he's doing. I'm like, it kept me intrigued. I didn't wait for a single. Every time Prince came out with an album, I ran to Purdel's record store in Brooklyn. I ran and got the album and got deep into it.
Let me ask you this, and we're going to kind of wrap up a little bit. Just talking about Prince live. Remember, you mentioned the Sign of the Times band. Was that your favorite sort of era? Let me ask, what did you think of Prince later, like Musicology and Beyond band, and his musicianship, you know, how it changed over the years? What did you think of his later live?
In my opinion, he simplified it more in the later years.
Interesting.
If you
What
look
do
at
you
the
mean?
connection, and I'm gonna tell you why, if you paid attention, and I'm not gonna get into the whole. I don't, I don't do that on my page as well. I'm not getting into the whole how because that's a whole nother. But I'm gonna say this: a prelude to things that would come that would be looked upon like, that's different. He's not doing as much as he did then in this thing, because the simplification of musicianship was always a core Prince's thing. He done did all the wild shit already. Think about it.
Okay.
He done jumped off pianos. He done did wild rock guitar solos. He still was doing that in the later years, but at that point, it's like there was a certain calmness to it now. So in comparison to that, now for me personally, everybody has their favorite. But I'm going to say this. Sign of the Times in comparison, it's my favorite era. Because at that particular time, I felt Prince stretched musically. He did what he did with the Revolution. I love the Revolution too, of course, absolutely, without question. They served their purpose. But right around the time, Parade, Madhouse, you can see where Prince was going in terms of the balance of all that. And that's why Sign of the Times is my favorite Prince album. Because you hear it. Play in the Sunshine, pop, Housequake, straight funk, ballads, Dorothy Parker, smooth R&B, contemporary. It straight pop, straight pop. Hot Thing, funk with a little bit of pop. Cross, straight rock and roll. Adore, sexy R&B ballad. If I Was Your Girlfriend, you got the look, pop, rock and roll. So the thing is that the band that he assembled, and this is my personal opinion, so I don't want people trying, listen, I don't get into that. The whole thing is that he put Sheila E. on drums. At that time, I didn't even know Sheila E. played drums like that. I knew she could play, but I didn't know to the extent until I saw Sign of the Times. That movie, that live movie, changed me forever. To this very day, anytime I just feel it, I'm like, let me just I just like watched it. Even I've seen it a gazillion times, but for me to see them go from Charlie Parker, Now's the Time, into, If I Was Your Girlfriend, and Forever in My Life, which is just a drum machine playing with Prince playing acoustic guitar. For me, the comparison of the rebelliousness of the fearlessness musically, the moves got more sharper. And then just that deadly ass rhythm section. Come on, he kept Dr. Fink. He kept Fink, added the badass late great Bonnie Boyer. Then you got one of the deadliest rhythm guitarists that could possibly be. And then Levi was playing bass, but everybody forget Levi's a deadly guitarist too. But his bass work,
they were locked in.
They were locked in. You can hear the influence in that. So for me, it spoke louder volumes respectfully than the Revolution stuff. And then even after when he put together the MPG, because I love MPG too. I love them all equally. But for me, that was a standout counterpart. I think with MPG's era, it became more polished. It was more glitz added on to the heavy sound, because Michael B is no joke. So that adds the texture to, and Sonny, and of course, he got his mentor. When you put your mentor, son, the great Sonny T, Sonny T gave me my props as a bass player, guitar player. I was done. I'm like, wow.
Can you imagine Sonny T if he would have been in the Sign of the Times band though? That would have been nasty.
No, it would have honestly, if Sonny T would have been no, because keep in mind, Levi respectfully bows down to Sonny too. They all, yeah. So the thing is that if he would have put Sonny in Sign of the Times, it would have been just as deadly, if not deadlier, because Sonny is a whole nother fucking animal. Me and Terry Lewis had this conversation, because I love Terry's in my top 10, but Terry always be like, he said, man, as dope as we were, as dope as Grand Central was, the family, the original family was the band you had to beat, and nobody, no matter how bad you thought you were, nobody was fucking with Sonny T.
Wow.
And Sonny T was the only guy that could tell Prince to shut the fuck up.
That's some shit, man. When you think about it, like how long it took for him to get, and then Prince brings him and puts him in, but he was the guy back home that they all knew was the shit. You know what I'm saying? Like that's some heavy shit.
Because Prince, because I'm gonna tell you why, because Prince still had to keep the the Gemini ego portion of who he was, because there were certain people, and I'm gonna be honest, there were certain people he could do that to, and there were certain people that he knew he couldn't do it to. No matter how much he could be Prince, like these people, like you hear Jill stories all the time. People ain't give a fuck. Like, I don't give a fuck who you are. The bottom line is this: this is what respect what I do, and this is where we go from here. So when I heard that Sonny used to, tell Prince, man, fuck off, or certain shit, Prince couldn't really argue. What's Prince going to say? Now he could tell him, I don't want you here no more, because he does have that power. But then Prince knew that his conscience would have never allowed that part to happen, because he couldn't have been able to live with himself on that point. And that's more of a personal thing anyway. But the thing is that the comparison, those bands, the Sign of the Times era stood out for me because of that transition where Prince really began to organically supplement the heavier elements of jazz and funk while still maintaining the Minneapolis texture. It was still a different sound. I mean, it was still, the Minneapolis thing was still there, but the Sign of the Times era had a more universal appeal, but it was still organic. And that has a lot to do with, honestly, the Bay Area influence.
Okay.
Sheila, Levi, Miko, and Bonnie are all from Oakland. That East Oakland shit, let Tony, that East Oakland shit, you can hear it.
Yeah.
You can hear it. You hear Housequake, the live version. Wait, I mean, it trumps the studio version by all accounts. When they did that shit on it just added a whole nother dimension to that shit. And it blew my mind. That me and my brother watched Sign of the Times every single fucking day with our instruments out, trying to learn. What's that shit that Levi did? We're trying to but this is how committed we were up until that time. And then imagine me, I'm what, 13 at the time, 14. This is me in front of, like, I'm sitting here talking to you. That's me every fucking day when I come home from school. Fuck riding a bike.
I was doing that with keyboards. I was trying to figure all of it out, watch it over, listen to it on cassette tape.
Trying to figure it out. And then you think about the combination of all that thing is because it all played a part. Prince had the ability to facilitate some of the greatest fucking musicians ever assembled. So every band that he had, even Third, I love Third Eye Girl. I love, and everybody, a lot of Prince fans have opinions. I get it. That's why I don't argue. That's why I'm not even a part of a lot of groups outside of the ones that we're a part of. I'm not really, because the thing is that my perspective, like yours, same thing with you, because we're among the aficionados that have actually done the homework, especially because we're artists. It's different for us. So our perspective is going to always be different from the average consumer that don't play music. Right. That's why I don't get into argument. And mind you, the fans love that about me. I said it's subjective perspective. Like, personally, for me, 3121 and Planet Earth, they had some great songs on it. Musicology, great album too. But after a while, with the exception of Rainbow Children, for me, once Prince crossed over to that side with that, it became less for me. I still loved him. I still appreciated the things that he was doing. But for me, in my opinion, the overall rebellious vigor was gone. That's the Prince who I fell in love with in terms of that speaking, whereas the spiritual part played even more of a thing where it was even more, he's not going to do head anymore. That's sad. That's sad for me. He's not going to do Darling Nikki anymore. That's sad for me too. But nevertheless, Prince musicianship wise, he still was who he was. So when I hear to see the clips of Welcome to America, I mean, look, Prince is still the baddest motherfucker there is on stage. So the bottom line is that part never changed. But as you see, as we couldn't foresee the struggles health-wise that would happen, then you begin to understand physically why he tried to give his best in those last years and why certain things begin to diminish in his performance. And then think about it. His last shows were what? Piano.
Right.
It wasn't, you would think his last shows, he would go out with a bang. His last shows were how he started in the game. Young kid playing piano, and then even back to his look. If you know that meme that's going around, they have all his looks from the For You album to the last project he did. He went back to the essence for real. So on a personal level for me, because just like anybody else, it hit hard for me in such a way. I mean, we still dealing with it. That's why it took me 24 hours just to even. I'm like, how do I write this shit without getting emotional and creating a reel to kind of just remind people on how a young kid from the streets of Brooklyn that had all these other influences, and here comes this one guy that basically turns my whole musical world around. And studying
Mm,
those bands, the albums, the double entendres that he would put in the lyrics. Actually, him and Stevie are the reason. Him and Stevie and Smokey Robinson, those are my three songwriting heroes besides Bob Dylan and Carole King and Burt Bacharach and those people.
mm,
Prince, Stevie, and Smokey, and Lionel Richie for good measure as well. So that's like in that section. Those are people I began to when I became a better songwriter, especially with Prince, because Prince just had a way of creating the story. I mean, you look at Raspberry Beret. That first verse is so, you know what I mean? Like it's to this day, it's still getting like I was working part-time in the father died. My boy was he told me several times I didn't like my contract. I was a bit too leisurely. That had the Beatles written all over it, but the way he wrote it, it was still
right.
it was a flow. You know what I mean? So that's what
Yeah,
I'm saying.
yeah.
Like little things like that, I paid attention to because most of the fans like, oh my God, he's talking to me. He could be, but for me, it was more like, nigga, I see what you're doing.
He
I
was
see what
slick as fuck with his word. Yeah, when he was in
absolutely.
his right
That
bag,
and, yeah,
unstoppable. Yeah, nobody could do it.
absolutely. So in a nutshell, that sums up how Prince came into my world, you know. And the thing is just that he's never left. I mean, every now and then we have a moment like, what would he do at a time like this? So even with my own artistry and my own merit as an artist with the Planet 12 stuff, anybody that's been to my shows, because even when we don't do any Prince tribute shows, when I do my own shows, you know,
Mm.
you can see certain things, but we try to make that balance of okay, we take a little bit of that, but we're going to take a little bit of some of this other stuff that both me and Prince listen to. Remember, Prince studied Chicago too. So a lot of people don't realize Prince studied all the other bands that he grew up listening to and incorporated certain things. So that's what we did in our generation by incorporating Tony, Mint Condition, and New
Mm.
Edition. Like we want to put all that in one pot and give the best possible show and experience on wax that we can give you the same to give you that feeling. Because you know,
Mm.
there's only one Prince. There will never be another like him. You can't compare him. We are all living embodiments. All of us artists that are studying, we're all paying a debt in some way to his influence.
The last question I want to ask you, and you being a musician,
Mhm.
performer, and you said there'll be nobody like a Prince, and I can believe that. As a sense, I could say there would be nobody who was a James, or there'd be nobody who was a
Absolutely.
Steve, but there will be somebody.
Yeah.
There will be something. What do you think? What do you think will be the next thing that's on the level of these guys? Was there an opportunity for them somebody to be on the level of these?
Well, I mean,
And what
you
would it
know,
take to do that? You know what I'm saying?
no. That's an excellent question. I think, you know, this is just my take on it. I've never ever got into the whole thick of the next because I realized the marketing strategy of the industry. For
Okay.
example, who are all the disciples of Michael Jackson? Usher, Hamarion, Chris Brown, B2K, that whole situation. You see it. But again, that can be me too. Because when you see my shows, you're definitely going to see some Jackson's Michael stuff because that's part of name a singer he didn't influence. I'll wait. So the thing is that I've always looked at it as this. Our job as artists of this generation and what we're doing now is just to take pieces of everybody who we love and then we begin to develop who we are. So I would have to really say that Bruno Mars is
Interesting.
definitely, he reminds me a lot of me. I did two shows with Bruno. He reminds me a lot of me. And the thing is that when I met him for the first time, we were backstage. We did a show in Hong Kong. It was me, them, Black Eyed Peas. I'll tell that story. I'll tell that story another day. So we're all there. I told Bruno and all his boys, man, it was like backstage. Right? I said, dude, keep doing what you're doing because I see what you're doing. And
Mm.
Bruno could have easily followed the trend like everybody else. He was smart. He was, and people, and I don't care who don't give him his prop. This is me. I don't give a fuck what nobody says. This is me. I'm giving it. He successfully did what a lot of other artists had tried to do in the last 4 or 5 years that were actually major label artists. I ain't gonna say no names, but he was able to do it because, I mean, think about the way Bruno came in. Bruno came in on the back of B.O.B. just singing a hook. because Bruno
Right.
just got a dope ass singing voice and he's a great writer. He
Mhm.
understands writing. But look who his heroes are. When he got them 6 Grammys for 24 Karat Magic, that speech summed up everything. He said there were three. He said when I was in high school, there were 3 guys who I studied the most, and Teddy Riley, Jimmy Jam, and Terry Lewis, and
Mhm.
Babyface and L.A. Reid. And what do all 3 of those guys got in common? Leon Silvers taught all of them.
Mm.
Leon Silver. You see every time Jimmy Jam to get in the war, what they say? Leon,
Right.
because Leon opened the gates. I work with Leon now. I just did a project with Leon not too long ago. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Leon still got the magic at 60 something years old. So Bruno was smart enough to give the props. He acknowledges his influences. He ain't
Mhm.
no culture appropriator. He's black. He's Puerto Rican. His father's from Brooklyn. So to me, if we're gonna talk about the next thing or anything that resembles that, excluding myself, because I feel like I take my rightful place in what I've done in my sector. And again, no arrogant, no conceit. The people who have been to my shows and heard my music, they can tell you the same thing. And not because we're trying, again, the goal is not we're gonna be like Prince. The whole goal is to do or continue tradition in what guys like Prince, like
Right.
the Jacksons, like New Edition, who's still out here kicking ass, like some of the bands like Earth, Wind, and Fire, who are still around, the
Mhm.
members who are still there. So the thing is that when Bruno came and exploded, I remember when Uptown Funk came out, my phone went off the hook. Everybody was like, "Yo, Law, this remind me of you." That's how you know. Like, this remind me
Mm.
so much of something that you and I said. Well, that's an honor to even be compared or mentioned that. You know why? Because guess what? Me and Bruno cut from the same cloth. Me and D'Angelo, we're cut from the
That's
same
how I'm
cloth.
bringing up D'Angelo
When
too.
I met, when I met, I met D while he was working on Voodoo. That's if you look at my Plant Soul Stories page on Instagram, I tell the story. I met him while he was working on Voodoo, and we had a 15-minute conversation. I was so excited to finally meet him. It was a dope conversation because people don't realize when he did that Men Strikes Back for VH1, and he did Left and Right, and he threw in Parliament Funkadelic. Put your hands together, come on and stomp your feet. That's good to your ear hole. I caught that shit. I said, that's Funkadelic. So when I met him, I said, dude, thank you for doing that Funkadelic. He said, see, only you a diehard Funkadelic. But I said, well, that's because I'm a die. At that point, I was a member already. So I'm like, I'm a diehard P-Funk member. I'm in it. So see what I mean? But that's the thing. But D'Angelo does shit when he wants to do it. So we don't know when the next album's going to be. Maxwell, all those guys, Lenny, I love them guys because to me, they were being touted as the next Prince or the next whatever,
Right.
Marvin Gaye. You hear all the influences in their music. So
Mhm.
I'm no different. I incorporate everything, but of course, I put that Brooklyn twist to it. You see the Al Capone hat. So I put that Brooklyn twist to it because I'm hip hop, I'm rugged, I'm from the streets, I have polish. I can be sophisticated when I want to be. You've seen the pictures with me in the suits with the corporate gigs and stuff like that. But everybody that knows me, I'm rough, rugged, and raw with the sensibility, and people love to see a kid in jeans and New Balance sneakers with a hoodie on playing an 8-minute guitar solo. So for me, I take my place in that, along with the Brunos and Tank and the Bangers and some of the other new bands, rock wise and funk wise, that are coming out there. So again, to add my point, there can never be a next anything. I just think that we continue tradition. Because again,
Okay.
to this day, I still bug out. People love the way I do splits, and I'm laughing. I'm just like, well, I definitely ain't the first person to do that. I learned from Prince and James, but people like the way that I do it. So if if they like, you know how it is. When they like more of it, you do more of it. So that's how it became a thing. But everybody know I'm like, I ain't the first person to do no split, but people seem to like the way I do it. So again, that's me carrying what? Tradition. I'm carrying tradition for all the
Mhm.
idols who we lost. David Bowie, one of my biggest heroes. We lost so many. So for me, anytime I step out on that stage, I'm representing New Edition, Prince, Jimi Hendrix, Stevie Wonder, who we still got with us, and I had the pleasure of hanging out with him last year for 5 hours in LA.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, that's a story for another day. But 5 hours with my second number two. So
With
you dig what I'm
Steve.
saying? So the
Yes.
thing is, for me, God forbid if Stevie left this earth tomorrow, God forbid, I can be able to sit there and say, I spoke with my number 2 idol for 5 hours and asked him everything I've always wanted to ask him. And to the point where his daughter said, my dad loves talking to you, because I was asking stuff that everybody
Mhm.
don't talk about. We're talking about his 80s albums. I met Prince only one time, and it wasn't a conversation. It was just him looking at us. You enjoyed the show? Like, and that was it. He left, jumped in the thing, and left. And me and Morris and Jelly Bean, as you know, my work with Jelly Bean and Monty Moore and Tony M. You know, it's 20-year friendship that we've had. You know, those are my uncles, my big brothers. I love them. So that's me carrying tradition. And the reason why they all support me along with Morris is because they know, God forbid, if they ever ended it tomorrow, they got faith in knowing that I'm going to be one of the ones to keep the torch. And it's not just me, because honestly, there's room for everybody. I don't get into the whole, well, we're better than them. I said, no, my thing is this. We do what we do. They do what they do. And the thing is just that if we do it all collectively, even if we on the same bill or whether we just supporting each other, saying, you know, I like that album. I like what they're doing. You know why? Because we're all part of the collective that's going to keep this thing going as the legends keep moving forward. Thank God we got Earth. Thank God we got Philip Bailey and Verdine White is still beasting out on bass. Thank God. Because
2023, still
2023, doing. Lionel Richie is 74 years old. That's my buddy. I tell him all the time, I'm like, you still playing tennis, huh? He's like, yeah, Lord. I mean, you gotta keep working that stage, man. Jeffrey Osborne, who I sang background with for 2 months. LTD, you know what I'm saying? It's like I get to work with the people who I love. So for me, again, it's never going to be a next anything. I ain't here to be, I'm the next so-and-so. No, if anything, I'm carrying tradition. So when you see me, anything that I do, it's in homage to all of the great men and women. Shout out to Climax too. All the great men and women, and the Go-Go's as well, and the Runaways. All the great men and women who influenced me in all genres of music, whether it's funk, rock, jazz, hip hop, classical, even country. I'm a diehard country music fan. So for me, I pay homage. When I step on that stage, I'm trying to give you the full spectrum. And that's pretty much what Planet 12 is about, man. It's all I've ever been about.
Man, I love it, man. Thank you so much, sir. We're going to give you a salute and roses here.
Man, thank you. Appreciate it.
Where can people find you online, sir, if they want to connect with you?
Okay, let's run it down. On Twitter and Instagram, at Planet 12 Law. And of course, I have my own YouTube channel, which is Law Planet 12. I even have the other one, which is Planet 12 Law as well. And of course, they can find my music on all digital streaming platforms, Spotify, iTunes, my first 3 albums, which is the Planet 12 Syndrome, the Planet 12 Live Sessions, and Mega Dope Maniac. And we got new projects coming out. We have 5 projects coming out. I have a new project coming out that might feature John Patitucci, which would be my second time working with the great jazz bassist, along with Jay Bianchi. We're working heavy on that right now. And my other Planet 12 stuff coming out. So Spotify, Planet 12 Law, Tidal, of course, Apple Music. I think it's Apple Music. I said iTunes earlier. It's Apple Music now. You can find that all there. L*A*W. And there it is.
Got it, man. Once again, thank you, sir, for coming on, man. You blessed us with a lot of knowledge and information and just the history and how music sort of intersects, man. I think that's something that we got to keep going for all generations. One of the things I wanted to say that you brought up was just the power of listening to our parents or relatives' record collection. The music that our parents and uncles was into heavily influenced what we do, and we got to keep that.
Can I say this real quick? To add on to that, let me say this real quick. It's funny because I'm so glad you said that, because as an 80s baby, I'm from the generation where it wasn't, your parents weren't cool. That's what all the 80s movies like Weird Science and 16 Candles and Revenge of the Nerds, the parents were portrayed as the most lamest, corniest parents there is. I'm glad to say that my view, being a black man that grew up with a Black Panther mother. My mother was part of the Black Panthers in New York City.
Okay, my dad was.
Oh, yeah. See, so we have a lot in common. So I'm proud to say, as you heard in this interview we just did, my family still is the shit. Imagine growing up in my living room with your mother, who's sanctified, filled with the Holy Ghost, but loves Prince and loves R&B music and allows her son to listen and get into it. So think about that for 1 second. I don't care what that generation said. My mother was the shit and still is. So for me, I had a different view. So I was like, all these white, like, our parents are white. They're corny. They're cool. I feel sorry for you, because my parents are the shit. Period. You know what I mean? To this day, I love my mama.
That's so funny you say that. My mom today would be the most, you know, almost conservative Christian style. But I was telling my daughter the other day, but my mom, I know the mom that I know was the Rick James, you know, George Ben. I mean, she did all that stuff. You wouldn't even think she would listen to any of that. And then my dad, he was the total funked out. I
You
didn't
had
even know at the time smoking and all this, but I sucked all of that in.
and you had to balance, because remember, I grew up, you know, because I'm Baptist Pentecostal. All my vocals come from that, but they're non-denominational because we went to Brooklyn Tabernacle, which is a mostly white-based church with a few blacks in it. So I had to, if you got to help me, Jesus, it's all right. And then I had to, he's one. You know what I'm saying? So that's why when I do vocal, the Lord, I love your harmonies. I said, because I know how to give textures, which Prince was also a master at, like Stevie Wonder is. So now you understand why when you hear my R&B funk stuff and you hear the harmonies, those influences come from Prince, Stevie, DeBarge, New Edition, the Silvers, and the Osmonds as well. I'm a diehard Osmonds fan, as I told you earlier. I love all of them because the influence of those vocals paid attention. So for you to even say that, I'm glad that you pointed that out, because I want to let this generation know your parents are cool. As you know, I'm a father of 4 grown-ass kids, and I'm a 3-time grandfather. So the fact that my kids,
I didn't know that. Does not look like the grandfather.
Well, I mean, the youngest grandfather probably most people have ever seen.
Young generation, man.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because my kids are all musical. So the thing is that, and now my grandbabies are showing it now too. My grandson wants to play. He's playing guitar now. He's only 2. He's trying to strum the thing and everything. I didn't even teach him yet. He grabbed it. So that's the gene. So I have that responsibility because I want to be cool to my kids and my grandfather, to my grandkids, the way that was cool to that.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So the balance of all that is saying that your parents are cool. Now I show my kids, because my kids have said, my daughter India was like, I had the coolest father in the world. I'm like, well, thank you. That makes me feel good. So, yeah, I mean, who else can have a dad that's into Dua Lipa and Little Baby and still turn right back around and listen to the Commodores and Ohio players, but yet your daughter loves Nirvana and Stone Temple Pilots like you do. My kids are the shit. They're cool.
Hey, boy, I love it. I love to hear that. And being a father and parent is so important, man. I appreciate you doing that the way that you do it and blessing the next generation, man. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you were enlightened and entertained by this. I had a great time talking with Law. Again, go check him out on all his socials. We're about to get up out of here, but you know what I always say? Work it like a job.
Before you say that, okay. Let me give you your Let me give you your flowers. First of all, thank you for having me. As you know, I've been a long time fan of the podcast. I've been waiting and waiting. I'm like, I gotta get in with this. I love your perspective. I love how you speak. You keep the culture, not just the Minneapolis. Let me point that out. You don't just keep Minneapolis culture and Prince legacy alive. We talk about real music. So anytime that I have a chance to tune in, I was going on my way to a gig in the Uber, and I had y'all on, you and D'Angelo, and y'all did the other part of the symposium and running down the book from Dwayne and all those guys. So let's just say thank you for continuing tradition and keeping this thing alive. Your podcast is what we need more of. I just want to throw that out before you do your thing. So thank you.
Thank you so much, bro. I appreciate that for real. But as I say,
now you can say, I'm sorry.
We'll see you next time. Peace. All right.
Peace.